Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Christine Dixon of The Ordinary Sacred, and I'm so happy you're back here with me. Today, I'm going to answer a viewer's question, and it's a very good question. This person is asking, what do I mean when I say you cannot get it wrong? And that's one of those things that I always say. What does Christine always say? You cannot get it wrong. Let's see, I always say you always make sense. You are your own primary caregiver. Whatever blocks the way is the way. Healing always occurs in this moment as you love whatever arises. And healthy boundaries is the distance between you and I, in which I can love both you and I simultaneously. I'm trying to think those are a few of the things that Christine always says. But one of them that I say frequently is you cannot get it wrong. So I'm going to actually read the person's question. This person gave a nice gift, a super thanks, and they said, "Dear Christine, I love your work here. Thank you so much." Three, not question marks, exclamation points. Thank you so much for your appreciation. And they say, would you consider explaining more about the phrase, you cannot get it wrong? I have heard you say it many times in regards to IFS, and I think also life in general. It sounds comforting to me, but most of my parts absolutely don't believe this to be true. Your parts make sense. I wish it was, though. Maybe you can make a video about this. So here I am making a video about this. Um, okay, so first I want to say that the parts, because many people watching probably relate to this, right? If I say you cannot get it wrong, your parts say, yes, we can. We have experience of getting it wrong, right? We have big red marks across the wrong parts of our paper or our test in school. We have um, memories of being punished, shamed, hit, uh, being having time out, being put in our room, whatever, right? When we got it wrong with our parents, we have experiences of being rejected by our peers when we got it wrong, or maybe having consequences when I judged the distance wrong and crashed my car, or I got something wrong at work and got a demotion or some kind of consequence, right? So those parts are right. I want to validate them that we can quote unquote get it wrong in the eyes of other people or um, in life, I guess. There are consequences to certain behaviors and choices. Okay. However, I would not call that getting it wrong ultimately. And this is why. Because this is something that my capital S self seems to know intuitively. And this is another thing I kind of say pretty frequently, which is there is no failure, there's only feedback. So even if and when we quote unquote get it wrong, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us, right? That we're bad or there should be any kind of shame. It's actually really valuable feedback. What if in school the goal was not to get perfect marks from the beginning, but to just say, oh, let me see what I don't know so that I can learn it if I want to. Maybe I don't even want to, right? So when everything is just feedback to us, then we cannot get it wrong. And I don't always love the analogy of a video game, but life is very much like a video game, in my opinion, where we're trying to level up or we're trying to learn, we're trying to get past an obstacle or move through some sequence of things, right? To get to this side. And we fail and we fail and we fail. But we learn each time we fail. And then we get further and further in the video game or level up. And it's the same thing in life. And kids, this is why they learn so well and so easily often, is because it's play to them, right? They mess up, they make mistakes, they learn from it, they try again. They, you know, try to put the block in this way. Nope, doesn't work. Okay, try to put it in this way. Nope, try to put it in this way. Oh, it worked, right? I love this story of the cleaning spray 409 is named 409 because they had 408 recipes for this cleaner that didn't work. And on the 409th, it worked. It was what they wanted. And so it's just an example of how um, there, again, there's no failure. It's just constant feedback until you have exactly what you want. There's this saying that people say that the people who are the most successful are the people who have failed the most because they took some risk, they allowed themselves to fail, and then they allowed themselves to learn from their mistakes or from their failures. And then they kept going until they achieved whatever they felt was success, right? So in our lives, as we are, let's say our success essentially is what I would define as success is living a life that is in alignment with our value and our values. So living in alignment with our own worth, with the worth of other people around us, with our authenticity, right? Living within our own capacities, not pushing beyond what's true about us, giving ourselves permission to follow what is life-giving to us and to say no to what is life-sucking, right? And so how do we find that success, right? How do we find that life in which we are in alignment with our values and our value and our authenticity? We listen to the ways in which we fail, the feedback that we get. And the feedback we get is through our body compass. So people might feel like getting a chronic illness or being constantly tired, right, is a failure or it's getting it wrong. But that's actually really valuable feedback that our body is telling us that there's something out of alignment, that we are pushing beyond our capacity, or we're living a life that's out of alignment with our value or our authenticity. And so our bodies will tell us, they'll break down, right? Just like pain is not a bad thing, right? If we touch a hot stove and the pain tells us, no, don't do that because that's going to lead to destruction, right? Don't keep going toward the pain. That's why I don't like the saying, no pain, no gain, because pain is a really valuable information to you to stop. Don't keep going, right? And so people who have certain diseases like leprosy, right? The issue is that they can't feel pain, and so they end up, putting their hand on a knife or on heat or something, and then causing themselves wounds because they can't feel the pain that tells them, no, don't touch that, don't go there, right? And likewise, we can have emotional pain when we're in relationships or environments that are not right for us. And so much of culture teaches us to just keep going through that, right? You're a better person if you stuff down your emotions, if you just pretend you don't feel bad and you just keep going. But that is what I call our emotional guidance system, our EGS, right? Kind of like the navigating system on our car, right? It's going to tell us, go here, no, don't go there. And that's what our emotions do. And so I share a lot of this actually. If you want it, all my self-paced courses are free on my website, theordinarysacred.com. There's one called Internal Family Systems and Your Body Compass. And I teach a lot of the tools that I learned from Martha Beck about how to connect to your body and how to connect to your body signals and how to connect to your emotional guidance system. So you can go get that for free on my website. But in a nutshell, the emotional guidance system, I like simplicity, right? So Martha Beck says, we have these four emotions: mad, sad, glad, and afraid. Some people will add disgust. to me, disgust is like kind of a mix of anger and fear. Um, but again, you listen to that. That's to me what's the aversion response, right? When your body goes like this, it means no, I don't want that. Something's wrong with that. Either a part of me perceives there's something wrong, or my body's perceiving there's something wrong. And so you want to really listen and get curious about that, right? But so glad, mad, sad, and a frad. And so the glad, happy, when we're happy, that's our attraction response. It means that our needs are being met and we're living in alignment with our value and others' value and our authenticity. And so it's a really helpful feedback. It says, oh, something's going well right now, or something, my needs are met right now. Other times we listen when we feel angry, mad, sad, or afraid, right? Anxiety, fear, because those are telling us that there's something threatening in our environment. There's an unmet need going on right now. There's a boundary that's crossed. There's a need maybe for to be able to grieve, to have space and stillness, to grieve, or there's a threat, there's a danger, right? So those are really, really helpful messengers. And if we have parts that suppress them, those make sense too. And you cannot get that's not even wrong, right? Because that part has usually learned to suppress our emotions in order to survive socially. And we will keep doing that until the consequence, usually emotionally and physically, is so great, sometimes total collapse or meltdown, breakdown, until we begin to question the conditioning that these parts have had, and we begin to create a safe relationships and environment enough to where we can allow our body and our emotional guidance system to come back up and be listened to and be obeyed is not really the right word, but just to receive the feedback, right? And to let it guide us to that successful life that is in alignment. So everything is always feedback. So that's why you can't get it wrong, because even if you go in a quote unquote wrong direction, there will be feedback in your environment, in your body, in your emotions that will tell you something. So as long as you can get curious about that feedback, you really can't get it wrong. So I hope that makes sense. And then the second point of this, because you said, in IFS and also in life. And in IFS, you can't get it wrong because whatever blocks the way is the way, right? So whatever comes up is showing you something valuable. There's never anything that's alive in you that's not worth getting curious about. And if you go blank, if you feel blocked, if you feel numb, distracted, that's just a part that's coming in and blocking the way. And you can get curious about why. And they'll explain to you what they're afraid would happen if you went to this part, right? So there's no wrong turn in the IFS process. But also in life, as I've been explaining with our innate guidance system and the feedback that it gives, but also another thing that our capital S self knows, in my experience, is that the ultimate reality is unconditional love. That is really what our self is, our essence is unconditional love. That is what all cap self, what some people might call God or the divine, right, is unconditional love. When people have near-death experiences, the most common thing that everyone talks about is this indescribable love that they have not fully grasped or experienced in these bodies, but that is reality, that it is more real than our lives here, that our lives here feel like a dream compared to when we die, essentially, and we wake up to the reality that there's nothing to fear, we cannot get it wrong, and we're unconditionally loved. So I think when I started saying you cannot get it wrong, it was because I had heard so many people with near-death experiences talk about that the three things they know for sure that are communicated to them when they are on the other side are what I just said. There's nothing to fear. You cannot get it wrong, and you are unconditionally loved. And they know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I have experienced that. It resonates with me because when I go deep into IFS work and myself emerges, myself 100% knows that. So I get that our parts don't believe it. They don't need to believe it. My hope is that they would experience it, that they would have that connection with the self who knows that to be true. And the self doesn't ever try to convince parts of that. Like I don't want to convince anybody of this. It gives the parts the experience of it. So that's what I'm saying when people with near-death experiences have this experience of being unconditionally loved, that's the experience my parts have when they interact with myself. Myself naturally delights in them. And I mean, they genuinely could do the worst thing in the entire world, and myself will understand why they make sense and will love them. Um, have unconditional positive regard for them. And so that's the experience that myself gives to my parts. And my parts, that's how my parts understand that they cannot get it wrong because they experience it with the self, that the self is never disappointed in them. It might encourage them to like, oh yeah, listen to that. See, that's really valuable, right? Oh, you tried that. And how'd it go for you? Oh, it didn't work. Oh, do you want to try something different? Right? It's just like a very loving um parent. So um so yeah, that is in my experience the ultimate reality for everyone, even though what the parts are saying that there are consequences in life. Life is very difficult. Other people will reject you and shame you if you don't get it right to them, right? The ultimate reality is the truth is that their value is not dependent on anything they do or don't do. It is innate. And anything they do or don't do in this life is simply feedback. Um, last thing I'll say, many of you know I love Anita Morjani, and she talks about how the most controversial thing that she talks about that she knows and is certain about from her near-death experience is this kind of concept because people want to believe that, people who committed these heinous crimes, murder and assault and sexual assault and all those things, that they've gotten it wrong and they're going to be punished. And Anita explains that in her near-death experience, it was like she was downloaded with this understanding. This is why it also goes hand in hand with everyone always makes sense. That even people who commit the worst crimes or like the worst, dictators or whatever, that they make sense. Doesn't mean that there's not consequences and harm that's done and it's tragic and awful and terrible. But if you understood everything that happened in their life, you would understand exactly why they were doing what they were doing. And there's a certain sense of, oh, their soul came into the world to do this. And um, and they will understand one day the harm that they caused, but they too will ultimately be held in unconditional love because it's about people learning and growing and leveling up, if you will, and that death is not the end, right? So it's not the ultimate. It's not like even if that's a consequence, right? Even if death's a consequence, it doesn't mean you did it wrong. It doesn't mean that you're not loved. It doesn't mean that your life is over, even, right? So, okay, I hope that that wasn't too much. That's some of the background. I love that you asked this question because I do throw away these statements. A lot of people will push me on what I mean with you're your own primary caregiver, and because there's always nuance in it, right? And people think that I'm saying that we don't need anybody and we're supposed to be hyper independent, and that's not what I'm saying. Other people are very, very valuable secondary caregivers, and we definitely need people. Um, so it's helpful for me to be able to have a little bit of space and time to flesh it out and give the full picture and to tell those parts, no, you are right, that you've had these experiences where you got it wrong. Oh, I do want to say one more thing. So when your parts express that to you, when they're saying, I had this experience where I was majorly punished when I got it wrong, so I can't let go of this belief that I can get it wrong, because the consequence could be that I'm going to be shamed or humiliated or bullied or punished in a severe way. And so you want to validate that. And what they're telling you is that they need you, your current adult loving self, to go back in time to that memory, to be with them, to provide the unconditionally loving presence that they needed and didn't have in that moment. That's how you'll heal. And again, give them the experience of that so that they can believe it. They don't need to just believe it intellectually, they need to experience it. And that's what they're asking you to do, is to go back to those times. So whenever we have these quote unquote negative emotions or sensations in our body, I'll say, this is another thing I often say, is that when there's an explosion, if you will, um, we always want to look for the TNT underneath the the dynamite, right? But TNT stands for unhealed trauma. So they might be pointing to for they would need you to go back to those moments and give them the experience of love and advocacy back there. The N stands for unmet needs. And so they may be letting you know that you've been, or parts of you have been overriding your need for rest and sleep or sustenance or safety, that you're not safe, that they don't have freedom, they don't feel like they belong or whatever, right? They're letting you know. I have other videos about the 9 human needs that you can go through, but those needs, that they're letting you know that there's something unmet. And if you can get curious, oh, this is a valuable messenger. I'm feeling really agitated, or something wrong with my body. Let me go through the needs and see if any of them are unmet. Usually the bigger explosion or agitation I feel, the more needs are unmet in that moment. And then, so that's TN. And then the last T is untrue thoughts. And really, untrue thoughts are burdens that certain parts have. So, let's say we are actually safe in the moment, but there's a part feeling unsafe because it reminds them of a past trauma. So its belief is, we're not safe, we can't go out in the world, we got to stay a hermit, or we can't take chances, or we can't have relationships, or whatever belief that it has that is painful. The pain of the belief often is what tells you that it's not true. It's a really valuable mechanism. If you realize you're having pain, identify the belief underneath. And this is kind of Byron Katie's The Work, but I always caution people to use it from self and not from another part, right? Because the self will gently ask the part holding that belief, is it true? And they might say, yes, it is. This happened, right? So this is connected to unhealed trauma. This happened to me. This is my evidence that this belief is true. And then the self can go back and redo and reparent that moment. And then they can release the burden of that belief. And sometimes you can update a part, right? It has a certain belief about people in general, and the self can give examples of how that's maybe not true in certain circumstances or in situations currently. But often myself will say, that is true, that like will validate the part that did happen. and it could happen again. And I will be with you in it. You are not alone. You're unconditionally loved. I'm here with you. So there's nothing to fear. You cannot get it wrong. Even if you look like you're getting it wrong, I will still love you. We'll learn from it. I'll be with you. I will not abandon you. So, all right. That's my very long explanation of you cannot get it wrong. If you have any questions after that, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Or if you have comments about that, things you want to add to what I've said, you're welcome to put that in the comments. Let's see. If you've listened this far, you can put an emoji of, I'm thinking like you cannot get it wrong. What emoji would that elicit? Maybe I don't know, a hug or a heart or sunshine. I don't know. It makes me think of like the sun shines on the good and the bad equally, you know. Um, anything, a gold star, anything that kind of represents that to you, that you cannot get it wrong. Um, all right. May we all be very kind to ourselves until we meet again. That's another thing I always say. And I will see you next time.